I want to talk about rolling stats. So Pathfinder Second Edition just came out, and that's obviously the inspiration for this video because it, along with D&D Fifth Edition when that came out a couple years ago, there's this big sort of pushback in sort of tabletop RPGs that have come out recently that have been sort of pushing back against the idea of rolling for your stats. Um, Fifth edition, the default it gives you is a point buy system, and Pathfinder Second Edition, the default it gives you is a sort of boost flaw system thing. Um, and they both of these games give you sort of optional rules for rolling your stats with 4d6 drop low, but they're not the main sort of feature. And I want to talk about that because I think that everyone should roll their stats with dice. And I don't want to say you shouldn't use point buy or you shouldn't use the Pathfinder Second Edition boost flaw system. But I think there's a lot of good things that can come from rolling your stats with dice that you wouldn't get from another system like point buy or boost flaw system. Um, the first thing I want to talk about is why there seems to be this pushback against rolling stats. From what I understand it, it seems to come out of this train of thought that companies and developers have where they want to make their games more balanced and more fair, um, which I can get behind completely. Like you talk about earlier D&D editions, those were the balance was way out of whack in there. And as they've gone along, there's no question that the rules have become more balanced. And in that way, the games have become more playable. So yeah, I'm all for making sure that rules and combat and things like that are completely balanced. But the when you start to do these things with stats, not point buy necessarily, but especially the boost flaw system in Pathfinder Second Edition, it becomes really safe, and it almost, in my opinion, it almost becomes too safe of a way of building a character. Um, it gives you the ability to generate a character that has a lot of sort of average stats. You'll get a lot if you do it the boost flaw system way in the way Pathfinder Second Edition gives it to you. When you when you've ended, you'll have a lot of stats that are 14 and 12. If you put a lot of things in one, you might get one that's 16. Um, but they'll mostly be 14 and 12. Some of them may remain at 10, a plus 0, and that's usually going to be the lowest it'll be. If you're an ancestry other than human, you'll have one flaw to a specific ability. So you'll have one negative point, generally speaking, unless you use one of your boosts to raise that back up to 10. And I think I mean, in a, it's too safe. It's not, there's something about that just seems not right to me. Um, it's too focused on rules and combat and things like that. It's too focused on sort of the mechanical idea of what the game is. Whereas when you generate a character, it should be more focused on the role playing aspect of it, what the character is, how the character works, what the character likes, things like that. The stats and skills and stuff are obviously important in the sense of the game. And I mean, I personally generally tend to enjoy a more sort of combat oriented, rules focused, mechanical game. But the role playing is nevertheless, the role playing is a crucial part of it. I mean, it's called a role playing game. That's the point, is to become this character. And so when you create a character, you want to focus on becoming the character. And rolling for stats is a really interesting and fun way to help you do that. So I want to make a few points about why you should roll stats when you create your character. Um, for one thing, it's fun. It's random. It's fun. You don't know what you're going to get when you roll. You could get something great. You could roll three sixes and get an 18. You could roll three ones and get a 3. Um, you just don't know, so it's fun to see what'll happen. Um, and it also ties into this idea that when you actually have your character and you play the game, you're going to be rolling for everything. Especially in Pathfinder Second Edition, they have all sorts of these subsets of the skills, and everything under the sun has a roll to determine your degree of success. So if everything, when you play the game, if everything you do is going to be random based on a dice roll, why not your stats? That just seems like an odd thing to me, that your stats should somehow be protected to help you out when everything else is up to chance. And plus, based on that, the idea of getting three ones, that's a very uh, that's a very um, uh, it's a I I'm blanking on the word, but it's not likely to happen. It's an intense scenario. And if you use the 46 drop low method, which is you roll 46 and you get rid of the lowest number, you're very unlikely to get super low scores. You're more likely to get honestly, you're more likely to get scores around the 14 and 12 range, like in the sort of like the end goal with the boost flaw method. But once you roll your stats, you would still apply your ancestry bonuses. So your scores would typically go up more. And actually, in that sense, more often than not, it's way easier to min max with dice than it is with a point buy or boost flaw system, if that's what you're into. Um, Plus, you can roll as many times as you want. If you can roll your six numbers, and if you don't like your six numbers, you can just scrap them and roll again. And until you get something. So if you're focused on numbers, if that's what you're worried about, there's you can keep rolling until you get numbers that you like. I mean, that should be no reason to stop you from doing this. Um, Not that I'm encouraging min-maxing, by the way, but if you want to, you can do it. Um, and I mean, and just my sort of final point is that just the lower scores thing. When you use the boost flaw system in Pathfinder Second Edition, it's not just you're unlikely to have very low scores. You're guaranteed not to have any. You'll have one if you don't do anything about an ancestry penalty. You'll have 1/8. And if you roll a really low number in one of your scores, that can be really fun. It can provide you an interesting roleplay quirk or a character personality thing that you may not have thought otherwise. Um, and that can help you create a sort of memorable character that not only you will remember, but the other players and the dungeon master, everyone will remember. And when they remember your character, they'll be more likely to interact with your character and have fun with your character, and just it'll be more fun all around. And that just sort of and that ties into everything is sort of too similar with the boost flaw system. Um, the dice rolling with dice sort of gets a nice bit of flavor to everything. And as a sort of brief example, if I may, um, the uh, the sorcerer character outline that I have on this channel, um, Athilwin, was actually one of my sister's characters in a game that I DM'd in a fifth edition game. And for that game, it was a couple years ago. It was around the time when fifth edition first came out. And one of the things I wanted to do for that game was I also sort of felt the same way about rolling stats with dice. So I wanted everyone to not only roll stats with dice, but I wanted everyone to go one step further and to roll their stats with not 46 drop low and add the numbers whatever order you want, but I wanted them to roll 3d6 in order and set their stats as they rolled. Um, which is real old school. It's like second edition AD&D stuff. And so I wanted them to do that just as a sort of proof that this can be a fun and easy way, or not, but just a fun way to do it. And so the character that my sister made um, rolled stats fine. She wanted to be a warlock, so she rolled some stats and she scrapped stats and she kept rolling until she got some stats that she liked. She was basically going for, she was waiting till she could get something with high charisma and high dexterity. Um, and she eventually got some like that, but the ones that she rolled in like a six wisdom or something. It was a really low number. Um, but she was like, the class doesn't need wisdom necessarily, so she just rolled with it. And so the concept of that character, which if you want to know more about the concept of that character, you can go watch the video that I made when I outlined what the character is. But the concept of that character was pretty much like how she reacted to her magic and her patron thing in fifth edition. Um, all of that stuff was based around her like six wisdom, her really low wisdom score that she got by rolling dice. And the way she role played that character was that character is very aloof, sort of didn't really had trouble concentrating on things, sort of short attention span, short-term memory loss sort of thing, and it was a real fun character, and um, it's a way that that character would not have evolved had my sister not rolled her stats like that. So rolling stats can provide interesting and fun ways to experience the game, which you may not get otherwise. And that's the main point I want to get across is rolling your stats can provide you new and interesting things that just a generic sort of boost floss system like second edition has can't do for you. And that's the main thing that I want everyone to go away with is that rolling with dice can sort of add it can sort of give you a wide range of things, but it has the potential to really add to the experience in a good way.